Good day and welcome to this video lesson over security and safety. Here we're going to discuss computer safety and health risks that individuals are at risk for, as well as using protective measures to safeguard our computing devices and of course our very valuable data. Here I just want to give you a few pieces of information that are available to you that I just wanted to kind of share. Here we got talking about the average total cost of a ransomware breach is around $5 million. Ransomware is the fastest growing virus that's out there, malicious software. That's what malware is, and ransomware is a version of malware. And ransomware takes control of an individual's computer. It takes all of the files that it's designed to target and encrypts them, and it would take over 100 years easily to be able to decrypt those files with supercomputers. So ransomware is very important to understand, and so many people get hit. And when I have customers or individuals that I know that get hit with ransomware that didn't back up their data, and I have to tell them, without paying the ransom, your files are always going to be encrypted. So hopefully you have backups, because we can reformat your computer, we can put in a new storage device, we can rebuild your computer, but the data is lost. Even when you pay the ransom, there's nothing that guarantees that they can't just encrypt it once again. And you can see how important this information is on this screen that I've got here. An average of about 5,000 websites a month are compromised with formjacking code, and you can see that's directly from Symantec. Most of the breaches that occur are going to be financially motivated here, and the average time to contain a breach is almost 3 months, and that's containing it and then rebuilding and getting up and running. So if you think about that, if you're a business owner, that's a lot of time that you're down. As an individual, it's going to seem like forever, because most people do not back up their data. So understanding these hazards are extremely important. Now, there are three main types of hazards from computers. I've got those listed here. Now, when it comes to information, data and programs are where we're talking about. And this kind of hazard comes from attackers who want to just simply steal your information, especially your personally identifiable information, or PII, because this information is highly valuable and valued as a type of data to be able to compromise. If you've heard about identity theft, that's what we're talking about here. So, or even information from businesses about things like maybe work they're doing on, or maybe projects they're working on. Maybe they're getting ready to launch some type of new technology. So getting this information is very valuable. Now, when it comes to the environment, toxic electronic components of computers and other digital devices are exposed when devices are just simply discarded and not properly broken down into their components that can be recycled. By not doing so, we're putting a lot of waste into the ground that doesn't need to be. When you go to get rid of a piece of electronic device, look for an e-cycling place or an electronic recycling place so that things can be properly disposed. When it comes to your health, here we're talking about things like eye strain or having poor posture whenever you're using devices. This is very prominent, and it's easy to see. Just walk by some people, like in an office setting or at home, and you can see how they're sitting very slack and they're not thinking about the muscles that they're using. Eye strain obviously comes from just staring at an electronic device for an extended period of time. Unfortunately, you will see this very easily with a lot of people because of the small phones that everyone has that they're staring at, within probably 14 to 18 inches for hours upon hours on a day. But we're also thinking about things like muscle fatigue from even something as simple as keyboard typing or moving around a mouse or on your touchpad. When you've got your hand in that certain shape for a long time, that does create a fatigue that a lot of people just don't understand. We talk about risk, and just understand that risk is the possibility something might occur. And when that risk happens, that hazardous risk, it's going to result in an injury or some type of loss, whether it's lost time or lost money or things like that. Just be safe. Look for an ergonomic chair. Look for a ergonomic mouse. Make sure that you are taking time away from your device to let your eyes get natural light and for your muscles to move in different ways. Make sure you're being safe. I just mentioned a little bit ago the term attackers. Attackers are simply individuals who launch attacks against other users and their computing devices. There's a lot of different types of attackers. You might hear the term script kiddies or script kitties. So kitties or kitties. You might hear this term interchangeably. Some of us just call them wannabe hackers. These are just individuals who are getting started and they want to attack computers, but really they just lack the knowledge about computers and networks that's really needed to do so. So what they do is they download freely available automated attack software scripts from websites, and they use it to perform some type of malicious attack, just to try to get a name for themselves. These script kiddies start out with absolutely no knowledge, just booting up, usually using like a Linux USB that has the software on it. Here they're usually just going to be running just a few scripts to be able to try to hack some random things just to get some type of pride and credit. Other types of attackers are going to be like hacktivists. Hacktivists are attackers who are strongly motivated by principles or beliefs. They might break into like a website and change the contents of the site to make some type of political statement. That's just an example of a hacktivist. And you've heard the term cyber terrorist. I'm sure it's used all the time. This is a specific type of attacker who attacks a nation's computer networks to be able to cause disruption and panic, or a large conglomerate's network to create some type of disruption. We also have nation-state actors or hackers. These are governments that are now employing state-sponsored attackers to be able to launch computer attacks, you guessed it, against their enemies. We also have inside hackers. These are a company's own employees, maybe even their contractors, sometimes, unfortunately, even their own business partners. There are, of course, a ton of online risks. With online banking, attackers are obviously going to try to steal your password to access your online bank account, and then, of course, transfer your money overseas to where you can't have access to it, but they do. There's also an online risk with e-commerce shopping, but how many people don't participate in e-commerce shopping in the 21st century? When you enter your credit card number to make an online purchase, an attacker can try to intercept your card number as it's transmitted over the network. This happens when you're using unsecured sites. If you don't see that HTTPS, if you haven't had to log into the site, if your data is being transferred as clear text data, it can be gathered. Another one's with fake websites. Attackers can set up some type of imposter website, and this fake website is going to try to trick you into entering your username and password, and that information then falls into the hands of attackers. The term you might have heard or have not heard until now is called website spoofing. Make sure you're paying attention to those URLs. If it looks really weird because there's a bunch of gibberish, it's probably going to be a spoofed website. And another one I have to mention, of course, is with social media sites. Attackers can set up to try to be a friend on your social media network site by pretending to be someone that you met or went to school with, then finding personal information about you and continuing to do so and collecting as much information as they can, that personally identifiable information that I mentioned earlier. And then there's online risk with data mining. This is where they're sorting through the extremely large sets of data to uncover patterns and establish some type of relationships. Now, data mining is also a positive thing. We use this because we have so much information. Let's just say the good guys use this to try to find out information for good reasons, like looking for let's just say Amazon's going to look for shopping patterns in your areas so that they know, or even with you as an individual, so they know what to put on your page for things that you might be interested in. Just be careful with everything you do online, obviously. We have to protect that personally identifiable information and just personal information in general. Give only the necessary information whenever you're completing an online form. If it's not required, you don't see that little asterisk or whatever, skip it. Don't give more than what's needed. Review the information that online sites like Google and Facebook and Microsoft and others have stored about you. Request to be moved from any type of mailing list. You've never paid for all that social media that you are using all the time. There's a reason that you haven't paid for it. In that disclaimer, it says they have the right to distribute and sell your information. And you're agreeing to it, so you're giving that legal consent. Another tip could be to create another email account to use when a merchant or website requires an address. I do this all the time when I'm shopping. I just create up a junk account, like using 10-minute mail. And they're like, oh, you can get a 30% discount. Well, I would love a 30% discount. Hold on a second. Let me give you this gibberish email off a 10-minute email. You type all that in. I'm going to get the notification. I can acknowledge that so that I get my discount. And that account's going to disappear when I leave here, and I'm never going to have to worry about any kind of spam email. Another thing is to not use your social media account login information to log into any other site. You should always, best practice, have a different password and user login name for every account. I know that sounds so overwhelming because we all have so many different accounts, but that's where you can use like a password manager to help you keep all that together, but make sure you're using a highly reputable and secure one. I talked about e-waste earlier, or environmental electronic waste. E-waste fills landfills and it's harmful to the environment. As Americans, we generate over 10 million tons of e-waste each year. This term might be new to you, but I wanted to introduce it to you, and that's Sustainable Electronics Management, or SEM. What Sustainable Electronics Management does is it just simply promotes the reduction of that electronic waste. Some of the things we can do is when we're shopping, we buy green or environmentally safe products. When we buy these new electronic devices, buy only those products that have been designed with environmentally preferred attributes. You just simply you may see an icon like what we see up here. Or you may see another icon that talks about being environmentally friendly. Another thing we can do is to donate. We can donate our used but still functioning equipment to schools or charities or nonprofit organizations. As an example, old phones can be donated, and they're then set up for the elderly so that they can call 911. Or third world countries. There's lots of different uses for those old electronics. There are a lot of parts that are in our electronic devices that can be recycled. Send equipment to a verified used electronics recycling center. There's copper, there's gold, there's all kinds of things in there that can be stripped out to be reused. Of course, there are a lot of risks to your physical health, as I mentioned earlier. Many users of technology devices report things like aches and pains that are associated with repetitive and long-term usage of these devices. This is simply known as repetitive strain injury. We see RSI in, manufacturing and repetitive environments, and this is just something we have to be aware of even as technology users. That repetitive strain injury impacts your muscles, your nerves, your tendons, your ligaments. When I say repetitive activity, this is where we're repeating the same activity over a lengthy time of period. Typing on a keyboard for many hours every day over several years can create a repetitive strain injury. Holding your phone and your fingers interlocked and moving your thumbs, at a crazy rate, time and time again, even the swiping. This is can cause repetitive strain injury because it's repetitive active. Now, if you think about these repetitive activities like the swiping, watch someone on their phone the next time. And think about that. They've probably had their phone for many years. They're going to continue to have a phone for many years. And they're going to continue to move those thumbs in the same direction over and over again. It will lead to a repetitive strain injury. Improper techniques are another thing. Using the wrong posture, could be a risk to your health. Not sitting upright with your back straight, your shoulders back, over long periods of time doing that slouching does affect the body. There's also risks to behavior health. There can be technology addictions. I guarantee you this is much higher than what people think it is. They could have a sedentary lifestyle where you probably know people that don't go out that often. Could affect people's psychological development, their social interaction. So these are just some common risks with people's behavioral health when it comes to technology. I'm a tech person, been a tech person for a long time, but I'm aware of these risks, and I make sure that I don't allow those to happen to me. There's also risks to people's social health, such as with cyberbullying. That's that bullying that takes place on technological devices because of social media platforms or public online forums, even gaming sites and live streaming. This is considered really more harmful than physical general bullying. Cyber stalking is another area that can affect social health. This involves the use of technology to stalk another person through various, electronic media like email, text messages, physical phone calls, and other forms of electronic communication. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of these types of risks. I've talked about cyber, terrorists earlier, and the cyber word gets used a billion times a day, but when it comes to our health and security, when it comes to our technology, we have to talk about cybersecurity and cyber attacks. A cybersecurity attack is any form of malicious activity that targets some type of technological system or the people using them to be able to gain unauthorized access to their systems and their data and the information that they contain that may not be seen by one person, but if they get access to it, even though they're not having permission to it, they can find ways to sell that information, to be able to exploit people, or organizations, to be able to do lots of malicious activities. In most cases, the cyber attackers are criminals who are looking to exploit the attack for some type of financial gain for themselves. In other cases, the aim is to disrupt the operations by disabling access to those systems, or in some cases, directly damaging that physical equipment. There are two main types. We have malicious software programs that are created by attackers to infiltrate the victim's computers without their knowledge. And there's tricking into performing a compromising action or providing of sensitive information. We must make sure that people are aware of cyber attacks and educate them so that they don't compromise their information, our organization's information, our technology, or any other type of malicious act. I've mentioned malicious software programs a couple times, and I've mentioned a couple of these already. I just want to talk about them a little bit more in depth now. Malware is just malicious software. So when you hear that term, that's all it is. And there's malware programs or anti-malware programs that you should look into to have on your device to protect yourself. Most people do not have any type of anti-malware software on the device, the computing device that holds a ton of information that they use every day, and that's their phone. Every phone should be protected, but you will find out, I guarantee you, nearly every person you talk to, no one has any type of antivirus or anti-malware software on there. Now, viruses have kind of come into the umbrella of malware because it just is a general term, malicious software. A virus is a malicious computer code that reproduces itself on the same computer. Now, worm uses a computer network to replicate itself. Trojan viruses are malware that hides inside another program and is often downloaded from the web, and it looks legitimate, but it's not. And once it's installed or opened or launched, that's when the malicious software takes over and does its job. Now, ransomware, I mentioned earlier, prevents a user's device from properly and fully functioning until some type of ransom fee is paid. There are a lot of ransomware attacks that you can look up, like Blocker ransomware, the Petya ransomware, WannaCry, Bad Rabbit. You can see videos of these and examples of these online, but they just really lock users out of their basic computer functions and maybe deny you access to your desktop, disabling your files to be able to boot your computer, or encrypting all of your files so you can't you can't see those pictures that are important to you. You can't open up a document that's important to you. It is really something that you should watch some videos on so you understand the impact. Like for myself, having to look at an elderly couple and tell them all those images and stuff are gone forever because they didn't back them up, and the ransomware period time has expired from the time they brought the device, and it's heartbreaking. So make sure you educate yourself and others about this important concept of ransomware. And there are different kinds of that. Another one I wanted to talk about is address spoofing. This is an attack that changes the device that you're using's address. Spoofing is a specific type of cyber attack in which someone attempts to use a computing device or network to trick another computer network by masquerading as a legitimate entity on that network. In IP spoofing, a hacker uses tools to modify the source address in the packet header to be able to make the receiving computer system think that that packet is coming from one of its trusted devices, such as another computer on that legitimate network, and then accept it. Because this occurs at our network level, there are no external signs that there was any type of tampering. So IP spoofing is very serious, because once that network says, oh, okay, this is a legitimate device, I'll give it access, then they have access to that information that's important on your networks. There's also, social engineering is very important. Attacks that attempts to trick the victim are where we're talking about with social network or social engineering. They attempt to trick the victim into giving them valuable information, and there's lots of different ways they do this. Phishing is where they're going to send an email or display some type of web announcement that falsely claims to be from some type of legitimate source in some attempt to trick that user into giving them some private information. A hoax is just kind of a false warning, and it's often contained in an email message that pretends to come from, of course, some valid source trying to trick that victim. Now, spam, we all know when we get on our email, stuff like that, we see these spam folder or spam filters. What spam really is it's just unwanted email messages that are sent from an unknown sender to many, many, many email accounts. And they're usually trying to advertise some type of product or service, but this can be a security vulnerability. We have to understand what spam is. If you've received an email that you don't know where it's from, you think it's junk, make sure to use whatever blocker you have or flagging system you have so that it can be put into a security protocol to be blocked and to share the information out that, hey, this is not a good source of information. This is spam. Same way with phishing and hoaxing. Make sure to let your IT group know, be aware of, or if you are that group, make sure you're taking all the necessary precautions. Even if you're like, let's say you have a Symantec enterprise distribution of the software onto all of your devices in your network, in your company. You can report stuff to Symantec as well. They may not be aware of it. If there's a first day vulnerability, then you make them aware of it, then they can start researching it and creating an update to pass out to all Symantec users. Just make sure that you're not just hitting delete or passing it on is another thing that happens a lot, especially in an organization. People are like, hey, can you check this out? Let me know if this is legitimate. Well, you just send it to someone else, and they may send it to someone else, and everything can just go downhill from there. We also have physical threats. So we need to make sure we're using protective measures to safeguard our computers and our data. Some of the things we can do is having that protective computer equipment like a surge protector to protect from electrical problems. A surge protector can defend computer equipment from electronic spikes and surges and noise. What we should be employing, even at the home level, is what's known as a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply, because it can be used to protect against blackouts and brownouts, as well as those other things that a surge protector can do. But if you're on your, let's say, desktop and you're doing some work and the power goes out, if you're on a desktop, it's just going to be lost. But if you are on a UPS, you may have 30 minutes, an hour, however long, depending on the type of UPS you buy, to be able to properly save things and shut your equipment down. In a enterprise network, having our very expensive UPSs allows us time. If there's a computer outage or whatever, we can shut all of our systems down properly so that equipment does not get damaged, information does not get lost, and when it gets restored, we can bring things up in a normal manner. We have different ways that we can protect our devices from theft. We can use a cable lock on laptops. We can keep devices out of sight when in a high risk area. As an example, when you go to a hotel, they have those safes in the rooms for a reason. Keep your phones in there, keep your laptops in there, keep your tablets in there. Make sure you're using all physical safety equipment that you can. Another thing we do is to simply avoid being distracted by the device and maintain surrounding awareness. If we have that awareness of what's going on around, maybe we prevent our phone from getting stolen from us, or our tablet. When you're walking, have your device, you hold it when you're using it with both hands, not just one. That's a preventative measure because there's more of you on that device. Do not use your device on escalators or near train doors. That's a distraction. Don't use or give chase to a device if it's stolen. It's not worth it. Enable your device's security features is another thing. There's just so many things that you can do as an individual to protect your physical equipment. I can't mention this enough, and I know I've mentioned it multiple times already. Create and perform data backups. Creating a data backup means copying files from a computer's storage device and then onto another storage device or even cloud or both, so you have multiple copies, and then that information gets stored in a remote location. An example of this is on the enterprise level, we back things up in the cloud, and we also have physical backups that we take to an off-site location, typically to another city. That way, if there's a natural disaster, our uptime is going to be less because we're going to be able to get up and running quicker because our data is physically stored somewhere else where that natural disaster did not occur. With mobile devices, security and privacy is, it's massive, but unfortunately most people don't do it. When it comes to, the vulnerability, it usually has to do with wireless networks. They are the biggest issue. Some risks are going to be like reading wireless transmissions, using, usernames, passwords, credit cards, and other information sent over the Wi-Fi network that could be easily seen by an attacker if it's set up for, that clear text data. An attacker who can connect to a home Wi-Fi network or even an open network could access any folder that has file sharing enabled on that network. This essentially provides an attacker full access to view or steal sensitive data from the devices on the network. They could also inject malware. They could download harmful content. So we have to take precautions. Only connect to an approved wireless network that's in public. Secure ones usually have what's known as a captive portal page where you must acknowledge to be able to use it. Now that doesn't mean that the bad guy can't set one up as well. Bad guys can do lots of things. But this is just something we should notice when we're connecting to a public network. You should also limit the type of activity that you do on those public networks to simple like surfing or watching online videos, not putting in your username and passwords to access sensitive data. Now, from a IT perspective, we are going to make sure that if we're going to have a public Wi-Fi, we're going to configure our routers for very high level of security so that people aren't at as much risk. Here's some things to do to help protect your privacy. This may sound silly, but a $10 paper shredder can do a ton of help for you so that you can shred paperwork that contains personal information before discarding it. Having one set up in your an office area so that while people may not think papers it's not that important, there could be some important information on there. So having that document shredded is such a preventative measure to protecting privacy. Don't carry a social security number in a wallet or write it on a check. Don't ever do that. Don't ever write it on a check. Don't provide personal information either over the phone or through an email message. Do it in person. People, I think about this when I go to doctor's offices and they're asking, hey, can you confirm your name? And you give them your name and your date of birth. Can you confirm your address? That's a lot of information that the bad guys could be sitting there capturing. You don't want them taking that information and opening up accounts in your name and things like that and ruining your credit. Be cautious about what information is also posted online and who can view your information. It's so silly when people post about, hey, they're leaving for a few days to go to wherever. Well, if someone has created an account through social networking and they're just looking for things like that, and they're like, oh, okay, well, that means that house is going to be empty for the next 3 days. So think about that. Don't let people post that kind of information. Keep only the last 3 months of your financial statements and shred older documents. For paper documents that must be retained, use a scanner to create an electronic copy of that document and add a strong password that must be entered before that can be read. Another tip is to be cautious with the website or app requests to collect data. Websites that request more personal information than what would normally be accepted, those sites should really be avoided. When it comes to securing our things, we should also talk about authentication. Use a strong password. A strong password is really just a longer combination of characters, whether it's letters, numbers, and symbols, and a combination of those. A longer password is always more secure than a shorter password, regardless of its complexity. Most security experts recommend that a secure password should be at a minimum of 15 to 20 characters in length. I know that sounds silly, but there are sites out there that can help you. Now, I do not recommend putting this password that you actually want to use into those sites, but as a classic example, how secure is my password? That site will help you figure out, okay, how long would it take this to be broken by the different ways that people try to guess passwords. And there's lots of different ways. But, even there's a site like security.org /how secure is my password as an example. Like I said, put something that's similar to it, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that putting numbers there and putting a special character here. Now, not every website will allow you to use every special character. They may allow you to use like the $sign or even the ampersand, but not every character. So you have to be, just because you have a great one you want to use doesn't mean that site will allow you to use it. But the longer the password, the better. There are a lot of recommendations for that. Don't use passwords that consist of a dictionary word or a phonetic word. Don't repeat characters or use sequences like ABC or 123. Don't use personally identifiable information without jumbling up and making it more complex. So don't use your birthday or family members' names or even your pet names, your address, or any type of personal information. And you can use like password managers. Now, Mac has a password manager and keylogger, so it's /keylogger, that's called Keychain. So that, and most people don't realize when they have a Mac that happens a lot. When they're putting their username and password in, it gets stored in that keychain. So if you are a Mac user and you want to surprise yourself a little bit, open up your Keychain app and see what information's in there you didn't know was in there. But there are other password managers as well that's available for everyone. Obviously, if it's a pay for service, it's probably going to be a better service than a free one. So just something to keep in mind when you're talking about that. Biometrics is another great area, and having something that is unique to you. The strong password is something you know. In the security world, it's called something you know. Biometrics is something you have or something you are. And there are also like tokens that you can have. That would be something you have. So having a combination of those is called multi-factor authentication. The more layers there are for proving who you are, the less of a chance that someone's going to take your information and use it. Because like with biometrics, they're not going to have your fingerprint or your retina or your voice or your face, because all this stuff is unique to you. Just add multi-factor authentication when you can. Some people still call it two-factor authentication, but we can do more than just two factors. Like you might have, let's say, you enter your password, and then a 4 or 6 digit code is sent to your cell phone. The code must then be entered as a second authentication method. You've proven who you are multiple ways by giving your credentials and then having a second layer sent to you to something you have that you will then prove to the site that you are who you are. I can't emphasize multi-factor authentication enough. Now, when it comes to security, we hear the term encryption, and I've used it a few times. Encryption just means a process of scrambling information so it cannot be read unless the user possesses the key to unlock it. That would be the term decryption. And encryption can be applied to data at rest or data in transit. Data at rest is that information that's being stored somewhere. Data in transit is where we're sending the information. The encryption key must be kept secure. You might hear the term digital certificate. This is just a technology that's used to verify a user's identity and a key that has been signed by a trusted third party. Identity theft involves using someone's personal information to commit some type of financial fraud. Thieves can make excessive charges in the victim's name, and the victim is charged for the purchases and suffers a damaged credit history that can lead to being denied for things like loans, cars, homes, credit cards. So we have to protect that personally identifiable information. I've gone over a lot of information. I hope some of that information makes you want to look deeper into your security and safety with your computing devices and, of course, your very, very, very valuable data. Thank you for following along. I hope you found this information helpful and that you go out and find out even more information to make you a better technology professional as well as more informed. Take care.